The ocean is as vast as it is unforgiving, an indomitable beast that does not forgive mistakes. Here, the rules of the terrestrial world do not apply. There is no refuge, no pause, no rest. On board a fishing vessel, surrounded by endless kilometers of water, a group of men and women face an epic struggle every day, a silent war against the elements, the machines, time, and often against themselves. The day begins long before dawn. While the world sleeps, somewhere on the ocean, the lights of a fishing boat pierce the darkness. The roar of the engines shatters the absolute silence, a constant reminder that this steel colossus is the only thing separating its crew from a watery grave. The cold is so intense it feels like it cuts through your skin. The air reeks of salt, diesel, and sweat. The deck is wet, slippery, treacherous. Here, every step could be your last. The sea, in its vastness, has 1,000 faces. Some are calm, almost hypnotic, but serenity always hides a threat. A moment of peace can turn into a hell of monstrous waves, relentless winds, and rain that falls as if the sky is unleashing all its fury. In the open sea, there are no normal days. Every day is an unpredictable challenge, an organized chaos where every crew member has a role to play, and there is no room for mistakes. Here, a single wrong move can cost you a limb, or worse, your life. The routine is brutal. While the world enjoys a hot meal and a safe roof, fishermen battle extreme exhaustion. Days stretch into marathons of 16, 18, even 20 hours. Sleep is a luxury no one can afford. Shifts on deck are relentless. And when they finally get a moment to close their eyes, sleep is not restorative. It's a collapse. Often, a sudden alarm or a change in weather jolts them from their fragile rest and drags them back into action. And it's not just a fatigue that tests their resilience. The conditions are ruthless. The boat is never silent. It constantly creaks, vibrates, groans under the weight of the waves and the tons of fish stored on board. Humidity seeps into every corner. Clothes are never truly dry, boots drip, and the cold penetrates even the thickest layers of clothing. The food, prepared in a swaying kitchen, is no feast. It is often repetitive, basic, and rushed. Eating is not a pleasure. It is a necessity to keep going. However, it is on the deck where the real action takes place. Here, under a sky that can be either glorious or terrifying, the crew works as if their lives depend on it, because they literally do. The nets, heavy as slumbering demons, must be cast, hauled in, emptied, and checked. Every pull is a battle against tons of fish, wood, metal, and brute force. Fishermen's bodies become machines. Taut muscles, callous hands, and skin toughened by years of battling the ocean. But the sea is not a fair opponent. It can change its mood in an instant. Waves, those massive walls of water that can exceed 10 meters, strike with a force no human can withstand. One slip, one moment of distraction, and someone can be dragged into the abyss. And the truth, harsh but undeniable, is this. In those icy waters, the chances of surviving more than a few minutes are almost non-existent. So why do they do it? Why do these men and women venture into the heart of the ocean time and again, knowing every journey could be their last? The answer is as complex as the sea itself. Some do it out of tradition, because their fathers and grandfathers lived and died fishing. Others do it out of necessity, because the ocean is their only chance to make a living. And some, the rare few, do it because they love the challenge, because the sea is the only force capable of making them feel alive. This is a story of resilience, bravery, and sacrifice. A story with no heroes or villains, just humans facing one of the planet's most hostile environments. Prepare to delve into the world of the open sea, where every wave is a threat, every net a battle, and every sunrise a triumph. This isn't just fishing. This is survival. Welcome to Aboard a Fishing Vessel on the High Seas. Life aboard a fishing vessel knows no pause. As the sun timidly rises over the horizon, its rays illuminate a deck already coated in frost-soaked nets, and hands work to their limits. But there's no time to admire the view. The workday has been underway for hours, and the pace is so frantic that any moment of respite feels like an unattainable luxury. Routine has no place at sea. Days and nights blur together because time doesn't operate as it does on land. Here, everything is dictated by the fishing cycle. The perfect moment to cast the nets, the precise locations where technology and experience ensure the largest catches. Workdays can stretch to 18 or 20 hours, and the concept of shifts becomes a fantasy. Sleep is fragmented, interrupted, and nearly non-existent. Some fishermen settle for brief moments to close their eyes. 15 or 20 minutes, leaning against any spot where the cold and the motor's vibrations are somewhat tolerable. Under these conditions, the body is pushed beyond its natural limits. Hardened hands, like old leather, work nonstop, hauling nets, checking hooks, and disentangling fish still writhing as if fighting for their lives. Backs bear the weight of repetitive movements, heavy loads, and the roar of machinery that never ceases. Fishermen move like automatons, trained by necessity to ignore pain, exhaustion, and often even hunger. Occasionally, amidst the chaos, a fisherman might pause for a second, just long enough to realize what's happening around them. The boat is no more than a floating island in an endless ocean, swaying among waves that seem ready to swallow it whole. That feeling of isolation, of being utterly disconnected from the world, can be both awe-inspiring and terrifying, but the work doesn't allow that sensation to linger. There's always something to fix, something to adjust, something to prepare before the next wave crashes against the deck. Fatigue is not just physical, it's mental. Reflexes slow down, the mind wanders. A snagged net can become a disaster if not handled with precision. A loose rope, poorly secured, can turn into a deadly noose. The risk of accidents rises exponentially as hours pile up and the body demands rest. Yet, these fishermen are trained to disregard their own limits, to keep moving even when everything within them screams to stop. And then there's monotony, a silent enemy that can become unbearable. At sea, the world shrinks to a handful of familiar faces, an unchanging deck, and an eternal horizon that seems to mock those who try to tame it. Conversations often revolve around work, the weather, or the families waiting at home. There are few distractions, and that can be a harsh punishment for those unaccustomed to isolation. But time drags on, slow and heavy. While others enjoy their homes, their families, and their daily lives, these fishermen are trapped in a relentless cycle of effort. And yet, despite all this, they find the strength to keep going. Perhaps it's the camaraderie, the unique bond that forms among people who depend on each other to survive. Perhaps it's the promise of a paycheck that justifies the sacrifice. Or maybe it's simply inertia, the human need to continue, to persevere. Out here on the open sea, there's no room for the weak. Each day is a test of endurance, a testament to the physical and mental fortitude required to face the ocean. And while the rest of the world sleeps, eats, works, and laughs, these fishermen press on, tirelessly writing their stories on the waves. This relentless routine, as unforgiving as the sea itself, is the price they pay to bring their hard-won bounty to the tables of millions who will never imagine the sacrifice behind each catch. The ocean is not only an indomitable giant, but also an environment designed to test even the strongest. Aboard a fishing vessel, extreme conditions are not the exception. They are the rule. Every second, every corner of the ship, every breath of salty air seems steeped in constant challenge. Cold is one of the most merciless enemies. Hundreds of kilometers from the coast, the wind cuts through the skin and freezes breath before it leaves the lips. Temperatures drop as quickly as the waves rise, and the humidity makes everything worse. No matter how many layers of clothing fishermen wear, there's always some part of the body that the cold manages to reach. Fingers, hardened by years of work, lose sensitivity with each icy dawn, and the danger of hypothermia is as real as the waves battering the vessel. But the cold is only the beginning. Storms at sea are true spectacles of chaos and destruction. The sky darkens in minutes. and waves that once seemed enormous transform into liquid walls threatening to swallow everything in their path. The wind howls with such intensity that fishermen must shout to hear each other, and every step on deck is a calculated risk. A rogue wave can snatch a man in the blink of an eye, and once in the water, the chances of rescue are slim. The frigid water shows no mercy. Within minutes, the body succumbs to the cold, and darkness consumes everything. The inside of the boat is no better refuge. Though it's the only place where fishermen can shelter from the wind and waves, it's far from comfortable. Humidity infiltrates every corner. Mattresses in the cabins are always damp. The walls sweat salt water, and the air feels thick, as though it could be sliced with a knife. The machinery, essential for the boat's operations, roars and vibrates constantly, making it impossible to find a moment of true silence or peace. And then there's the food. At sea, meals are not a parade of gourmet dishes. The kitchen is small, perpetually rocking with the boat's movements, and provisions are limited. Fishermen subsist on basics: hot soups, stale bread, canned goods, and occasionally fresh fish. Eating is not a pleasure. It's a functional act necessary to keep their bodies going amid endless days of work. Physical exhaustion combines with mental fatigue in a dangerous mix. The limited space aboard the ship, the absence of communication with the outside world, and the monotony of the surroundings can wear down even the most resilient. Isolation, which at first might seem like an escape from life on land, quickly becomes a heavy burden. Days feel endless, and the routine becomes a silent enemy, attacking the morale of the crew. However, despite these extreme conditions, fishermen cannot afford to let their guard down. Every minute at sea is a battle to ensure the safety of the ship, the catch, and their own lives. A loose rope can become a deadly weapon. A torn net can mean the loss of tons of fish, and a single wrong decision can lead to an irreparable tragedy. The ocean does not discriminate. It doesn't matter how experienced you are or how many years you've spent facing its waves. There will always be a moment when nature reminds you who's in control. And despite this, fishermen return time and again, challenging the mighty blue, braving the cold, storms, and solitude. For them, this is more than a way of life. It's a challenge, a constant struggle against the elements that defines who they are and what they're made of. In these extreme conditions, where others would give up, they find the strength to keep going, because they know that every sunrise, every full net, is a victory against an enemy that will never stop fighting. The heart of a fishing vessel beats on its deck, that small patch of the world where a constant battle between man and sea is waged. There is no rest here, no truce, no moment to relax. Every fisherman knows that working on deck is a frenzied dance of precision, strength, and endurance, where one misstep can have catastrophic consequences. The day begins when the nets, those enormous webs that seem like extensions of the ship itself, are cast into the ocean. This is neither a simple nor a quick process. It requires impeccable coordination among all crew members. Each net, which can stretch hundreds of meters and weigh tons, must be deployed carefully to avoid tangling. Fishermen move like pieces in a well-oiled machine, shouting orders, securing ropes, and ensuring everything is in place. But there are no guarantees. A poorly tied knot or a misaligned net can halt operations for hours and jeopardize the entire catch. The real challenge begins when it's time to haul in the nets. This is where the work becomes a test of brute strength. Tons of fish trapped in the nets must be lifted from the water, and there's no room for slowness. The machinery operates at maximum capacity, but human intervention is indispensable. Fishermen position themselves strategically, pulling with all their might, gripping the ropes, ensuring that every fish caught makes it onto the boat. Their hands, hardened by years of labor, slide across the rough ropes, and blisters and cuts are so common they no longer feel them. Danger lurks in every movement. A heavy net swinging with the boat's motion can hit with the force of a battering ram. Taut ropes are deadly traps. An accidental snag can drag a man into the water in the blink of an eye. And while all this is happening, Waves continuously batter the deck, soaking everything, making each step a test of balance. Many fishermen have lost their lives simply because they slipped at the wrong moment. The salt water shows no mercy. Once you fall, the combination of cold, currents, and the ship's enormous propellers make rescue nearly impossible. But it's not just the sea that poses a danger. The machinery aboard, though indispensable, also has its dark side. Winches, those large drums that reel in ropes and nets, can crush bones in seconds if someone isn't paying attention. Cranes lifting the largest catches are not always predictable, and a cable failure can unleash disaster. Every crew member must remain constantly alert, even when exhaustion clouds their senses. Then comes the sorting process. Once the catch is aboard, another equally exhausting phase begins. Fishermen must sort the fish by size and species, a task requiring speed and precision. They do this in constant cold, with wet, gloved hands, while the boat keeps swaying mercilessly. The younger crew members are often assigned this job, learning from the veterans, who can identify each species at a glance and decide its fate. Injuries are inevitable, backs strained from constant labor, deep cuts on hands from knives or hooks, even broken bones from the unpredictable shifts of heavy loads. Some fishermen wear these marks as trophies, signs of a life devoted to the sea, but also as reminders of how relentless their work can be. And yet, there are moments when a fisherman pauses, if only for a second, to take in the fruits of their labor. Seeing a net full of fish, glistening under the sun or the deck lights at night, is a powerful image. It's a victory in a relentless struggle, a tangible reward for hours of nearly superhuman effort. Working on the deck is not just a job. It's a ritual, a daily demonstration of human will against the forces of nature. And even with hands covered in cuts, bodies exhausted, and hearts racing, every fisherman knows that this is their life, their purpose. With every net cast, with every wave faced, they are challenging the ocean, proving that if only for a moment, they can conquer it. In the ocean, death is not a distant possibility. It is a constant presence, a shadow that haunts every move on the fishing vessel. Here, every day is a battle against an invisible and merciless enemy, the sea itself. While working on deck and facing extreme conditions is a challenge, the mortal dangers truly define life at sea. The most obvious and ever-present threat is the ocean itself. A wave may seem harmless from the safety of the shore, but at sea, those same waves can turn into towering walls of water, reaching over 10 meters high. These liquid beasts strike with the force of a speeding truck, sweeping everything in their path. In mere seconds, a deck can become a deadly, slippery trap. If a fisherman is swept overboard, the chances of survival are nearly non-existent. The water is freezing, the currents are fierce, and reaction time is minimal. Even with the best rescue efforts, many fishermen have been claimed by the sea before anyone could even call their name. Cold is another relentless enemy. Icy water not only numbs muscles, but also drains body heat at an alarming rate. Hypothermia sets in within minutes, and once the body loses its ability to move, fate is sealed. Safety equipment like immersion suits can help, but there isn't always time to use them. Every second counts, and at sea, time is always against you. Winches and cranes, essential for handling nets and heavy loads, are also dangerous tools. Taut ropes can snap with the force of a whip, cutting through anything in their path. Cranes, lifting tons of fish or equipment, show no mercy for errors. A poorly calculated move can cause a cable to snap, crushing everything beneath it. In the best-case scenario, these injuries are severe. In the worst, they are fatal. Then there are the storms. When the sky darkens and the wind begins to howl, the ship becomes a toy in nature's hands. Storms at sea are not mere rain showers. They are unleashed forces that combine giant waves, hurricane-force winds, and lightning illuminating the chaos. Fishermen must secure the nets, maintain the ship's balance, and above all, survive. In these conditions, there is no margin for error. A loose rope, a stumble on the deck, or even a lightning strike nearby can be enough to spark disaster. But danger doesn't end with nature or machinery. Physical and mental exhaustion is also a silent killer. Fatigue dulls reflexes, slows movements, and increases the likelihood of mistakes. At sea, there's no room for errors. A single misstep can mean being struck by moving equipment, falling overboard, or becoming trapped in machinery that never stops. And if that weren't enough, there's the ever-present fear of ghost ships. Vessels that were once fishing boats, now abandoned and adrift. These rusted hulks are a tangible reminder of what can happen when the ocean decides it's done playing. Every fishing boat carries with it stories of crewmates who never returned, storms that swallowed entire ships, and accidents that left families waiting in vain. These tales, whispered during night watches, serve as a reminder that the sea never forgets and never forgives. Yet, despite all these dangers, fishermen return time and again. Perhaps it's because they know that every day at sea is a challenge that makes them stronger, more resilient. Or maybe it's because, despite everything, the ocean gives them a reason to fight. But one thing is certain. Every time a ship sets sail, it carries a crew that knows the sea is not a friend, but a worthy and lethal adversary. At sea, danger isn't something you avoid. It's something you face wave after wave, with courage and determination. For these fishermen, every full net, every catch, is a victory against an enemy that never stops attacking. And every sunrise is a reminder that, for at least one more day, they have prevailed. Life at sea doesn't just wear down the body, it slowly consumes the spirit. For fishermen, every day is a relentless struggle that leaves visible and invisible scars, a high price that not everyone is willing or prepared to pay. But for those who choose this life, there's no turning back. The sea demands their loyalty and, at times, their humanity. The physical toll is immediate and brutal. Fishermen return home with bodies that tell stories of war, backs bent from the weight of nets, hands rough and deformed from years of labor, and scars tracing their limbs like maps of lost battles. Constant exposure to cold, humidity, and long hours accelerates the wear and tear. Arthritis and chronic injuries are constant companions, and some fishermen, barely in their 40s, have bodies that seem to have lived a century. Many are forced to retire early, not due to lack of will, but because their bodies simply can't continue. But the physical wounds are only part of the cost. The true battles are fought in the mind and heart. Family separation is one of the heaviest burdens to bear. With every departure, fishermen leave behind their loved ones, facing the uncertainty of whether they'll return. For their families, every radio call, every news report of a shipwreck, is a constant reminder that the sea doesn't always return what it takes. Birthdays, anniversaries, and important moments pass without them, creating an emotional distance that is often irreparable. Isolation at sea amplifies this emotional cost. Surrounded by water, with only a handful of companions, life can feel like being in a floating prison. The unyielding routine, the lack of communication with the outside world, and the endless monotony erode morale. Some fishermen find solace in camaraderie, in the bonds formed by sharing such an extreme experience, but others succumb to the weight of solitude. The long, cold nights, with the constant roar of waves as the only sound, become fertile ground for nostalgia and despair. The constant stress of working in such a dangerous environment also takes its toll. Every fisherman knows someone who never came back, a crewmate lost in a storm, an accident, or simply vanished into the depths. These ghosts stay with them, their names whispered in nighttime conversations, their memories etched in the hearts of those who knew them. The trauma of these losses, combined with the stress of facing death daily, leaves invisible scars that many carry long after they've left the sea. And it's not just the mind that suffers. Long-term health problems are inevitable. Prolonged exposure to diesel fumes and other chemicals on the boats affects their lungs and skin. Poor diets, consisting mostly of canned and preserved foods, weaken immune systems and drain energy. Some fishermen develop heart disease or kidney problems due to the physical strain and poor nutrition. It's a high price to pay to bring sustenance to the tables of millions of people. Despite everything, many fishermen continue. For some, it's a matter of pride. For others, it's simply an economic necessity. Fishing isn't just a job. It's a way of life passed down through generations. Even knowing the cost is high, these men and women return to the sea, drawn by something beyond logic, a calling, a connection to the ocean that defies explanation. To those watching from the shore, fishermen may appear as romantic figures, heroes defying the sea for a greater purpose. But the reality is far grittier. Every catch, every sunrise at sea, comes with a price few are willing to pay. Yet they do it day after day, with scars on their bodies and souls, because for them, this is their life, their destiny, their way of defying the impossible. At sea, there's no room for weakness, and while the human cost is staggering, these men and women face it with unwavering courage, because they know that every time they face the ocean, they're not just fighting to survive. They're fighting to keep alive the connection between humanity and the sea. On the surface, deep-sea fishing may seem like a lucrative enterprise. Tons of fish unloaded at ports, markets brimming with fresh marine life, and high prices promising wealth. But behind every boat that returns laden with its catch lies a harsh economic reality that few understand. Fishermen, the true heroes of this chain, often find themselves trapped in an unequal struggle, sacrificing their lives for rewards that rarely match their efforts. The first financial blow comes even before the boat sets sail. Maintaining a fishing vessel is a colossal expense. Constant repairs, fuel for long journeys, and specialized equipment like nets, cranes, and refrigeration systems represent massive investments. Every trip to sea is a financial gamble, and any mechanical failure or unexpected storm can turn a promising voyage into economic ruin. Captains often have to incur debt to keep their boats operational, a burden that inevitably falls on the shoulders of the entire crew. Revenues, while seemingly impressive on paper, are not as generous when broken down. The price of fish fluctuates constantly, affected by factors ranging from government policies to international trade agreements. A plentiful catch might be worth little if the market is oversaturated, while the most valuable species are often the hardest and most dangerous to catch. Moreover, intermediaries in the distribution chain, transporters, processors, and merchants, often take a significant share, leaving fishermen with only a fraction of the product's final value. For the crew, the situation is even more challenging. Fishermen's wages are often not guaranteed. In many cases, they depend directly on the amount of fish caught. This means they can endure weeks of exhausting work without fair pay if the catch is scarce, or the boat encounters technical problems. Additionally, these wages must cover not only their personal needs, but also the expenses of their families, who often rely entirely on this income. The comparison with other dangerous jobs is alarming. Professions like mining or construction, while equally risky, tend to offer higher wages, life insurance, and additional benefits. In contrast, fishermen rarely have access to health insurance, accident compensation, or decent pensions. In many cases, if a fisherman is seriously injured or dies at sea, their family is left destitute, with little or no financial support to cope with the loss. Additionally, the fishing industry faces increasing economic pressure due to overfishing and environmental regulations. Declining fish populations mean boats must travel farther and stay at sea longer to secure profitable catches, increasing operational costs. Government-imposed quotas, while necessary to protect marine ecosystems, often reduce fishing opportunities, forcing fishermen to adapt to ever-narrowing profit margins. Competition is also fierce. Industrial fishing fleets, backed by large corporations, often overshadow smaller boats, monopolizing resources and flooding markets. For independent fishermen, this translates into a constant struggle to stay afloat, both literally and economically. Even when they manage a good catch, they face a system designed to favor the big players, leaving them with little bargaining power. Despite these adversities, many fishermen continue in this industry because they see no other option. In coastal communities where job opportunities are scarce, the sea becomes the only means of livelihood. For some, it's a family tradition. For others, an inescapable necessity. But what they all share is a determination to keep going, even when the system seems stacked against them. Deep-sea fishing is not just a job. It is an act of resistance against an economic world that rarely recognizes its true value. While others enjoy the fruits of their labor at the dinner table, fishermen battle the waves and inequalities, driven by a mix of necessity, courage, and pride. It's an economy built on human sacrifices, and every piece of fish that reaches the market is a reminder of the lives that sustain this fragile but essential industry. And so we end this journey aboard a deep-sea fishing vessel, an odyssey where human courage challenges the relentless forces of nature. Now that you've seen the sacrifice, risk, and strength of fishermen, perhaps you'll see the ocean with new eyes, not just as a vast and beautiful landscape, but as a place where a daily battle for survival is fought. These invisible heroes of the sea remind us that every fish on our table has a story, a titanic effort behind it. And though we may never hear their names or see their faces, each of them leaves their mark on the infinite waters of the ocean. If this story moved you as much as it did me, subscribe to my channel so we can continue exploring the fascinating yet perilous world of deep-sea fishing together. Here, you'll find more stories of bravery, sacrifice, and connection with nature. Don't forget to like this video and share this journey with your friends.